Thompson, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, and I would like to welcome you to this virtual meeting. Can I remind all participants that the normal rules of procedures apply? For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the Chair. As we are meeting virtually, proceedings may take slightly longer, so your patience is appreciated. As per our virtual meeting, procedures questions have been received prior to the meeting, and I will call on the relevant member at the appropriate time to raise their question. While members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able actively to participate or comment on proceedings. As this meeting is being live streamed, I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this. Right. We'll just go to the agenda now. Have we got any apologies? Caroline, have we got any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've got a few apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Cook, Councillor Udden, Councillor Morstan and Councillor McTighe. And we've also got Councillor Branson acting as a substitute for Councillor Cook and Councillor Jeanette Walker as a substitute for Councillor Udden today. And Councillor McTighe's unfortunately been unable to join us because of issues with the technical side of things, and that's the only reason she's got her apologies in today. Thanks, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. Welcome, Councillor Branson and Councillor Walker. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, I take that as a no. Thank you very much. The minutes of the OSB from the 2nd of July. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get them, so we're going to defer them till the next meeting in September. Right. Agenda item 4 is the Executive Forward Work Programme. Has everybody read this? Is there any queries that anyone wants to raise regarding the Executive Forward Work Programme? No, right. Can we approve them? Right. Agenda item number 5, the Executive Member Update Regeneration. Can I just say we've got the Executive Member, Councillor Ashley Waters here, and we've got Kevin Parks, the Executive Director of Growth and Place. Can I just thank Kevin for stepping in at the last minute? And you know, I really appreciate that. To give us a presentation and to answer any questions from members of OSB. Can I first take Councillor Waters? If you could just introduce yourself and tell us about your portfolio and what it involves for the people who are watching Scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I'm Councillor Ashley Waters. I'm the Ward Councillor for North Ormsby and the Executive Member for Regeneration for Middlesbrough. So my role includes numerous things during this COVID. The majority of it's been recovery groups looking at how we keep the town going, how we work towards keeping Middlesbrough open for business, where it's feasible and safely as we can, really. With that, it's a number of different things. So it's the different projects that are going on in and around Middlesbrough, whether that be to do with housing, businesses, a number of different things. I also sit on the TVCA for transport, and Transport for the North as well, Scrutiny, I also attend.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Can I hand over now to Kevin? Do you want to start your presentation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Caroline, is it possible to put this up on the screen so all councillors on OSP and anybody else can see the presentation, please?
I'll just do that for you now, Kevin.
Thank you, Caroline. Just to introduce this presentation, it's on the primarily focusing on the town centre recovery as a consequence of the COVID-19. So what I'll go through is I'm going to initially just a very high level overview of our council's response to the lockdown in the town centre, the establishment of a recovery group. We'll then put this into a context of the town centres and the measures we put in place. Then we'll look at the particularly a focus that we put onto the hospitality industry, which is more recently opened or reopened in the main, and then some issues about the wider business community. And then obviously there's an opportunity at the end of this, if that's in agreement with you, Councillor Thompson, that members of OSP can put the questions at the end of the presentation. Might be best to cover that then. And Councillor Waters and myself will be able to hopefully accommodate that. Sorry, there is a gap in there.
Yeah.
I've got the data. Thank you. So
Yeah, just reiterate that we will take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So just to initially, how way back when in the middle of March, the response to COVID really, in terms of lockdown procedures, started occurring before the Prime Minister's announcement on the Friday. We had reduced the number of people attending council offices. The bus station had been closed. And we closed cultural facilities, but we obviously rolled that forward with full lockdown, closure of car parks and also our own commercial premises. The council owns a small number of businesses in the town centre, such as Broadcasting House, as an example, where we ensure closure of businesses. Throughout this process, we've worked very closely with Tees Valley Combined Authority, use the acronym name of TVCA there, who've been providing aid and support, but have worked collaboratively with officers and the executive member in terms of signposting businesses to the right support. The data is now in. After lockdown, the town centre footfall at the end of June was around 65% of what it was pre-lockdown. That footfall is the number of people walking up and down the streets, in effect. And there's 5 counterpoints we have. National averages at the moment is around 62% in terms of recovery in the high streets in the same period. So we're slightly above in terms of the numbers of people who've been returning back to Middlesbrough. We established early on, and I'll come on to this, a town centre recovery group, which I'll talk about in a minute. But throughout the lockdown period, those of you who did visit the town centre will have noticed a few businesses did remain open. Chemists, banks and food shops did remain, but it was very, very quiet. So the town centre recovery group was established in April, at the end of April, to look at short and long-term responses to the COVID crisis. It feeds into the part of the wider Middlesbrough recovery, which looks at all aspects of the council's and Middlesbrough's operation to address the response to COVID. And there is what's called a gold meeting for Middlesbrough recovery every week on Thursday afternoon. In fact, we've just had that this afternoon. Town centre recovery is now meeting fortnightly. We have representatives on there from the likes of the Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Small Businesses, shopping centres and their owners. Pub Watch have a representative on there, the University College, 13, Middlesbrough Football Club, and a number of others. We've also got representation in there from a number of departments, and 2 executive members have attended recovery throughout the process. And those executive members for regeneration, and Ashley Waters, who's on today's OSP with me, and also the executive member for culture and communities, Caroline, if we could just roll forward. I thought we'd just put it into context, though, of recovery. It's well reported, the challenges facing the high street long before COVID really started having the very negative impacts it's had on town centres. And the government had actually already launched at the back end of 2019 the Future High Streets Fund because of the challenges facing towns like Middlesbrough. Only essential, though, retail remained open throughout the period, which has meant very major disruption to many businesses and their operations. And you can't help but look at national media at the moment and see that the demise of many of our big high street names have been happening over recent weeks and months. However, non-essential retailers did reopen at the 15th of June. It has to be said, in Middlesbrough, there was a very good response to that. Most of our stores have reopened, and they've been brilliant at following, far as we're aware. There are obviously always glitches, but they've been following the guidance provided by government in trying to ensure all the requisite social distancing. It has to be acknowledged in this, though, we're very acutely aware that there's a lot of uncertainty in people's appetite to visit areas like town centres, and particularly indoor shopping centres. And therefore, it's about the reassurance to residents and to the workers in the shops about the measures that have been put in place, both by the businesses and by the council in the public spaces. And we've been planning around this about all eventualities, and we've taken a sort of an approach about event management. I mentioned also that there's been a big response in there in terms of, so it's the next one now, Caroline, about the grants and the business rate relief that's been put in place and the business support that's been put in place. Within all of this, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've been toying with, and along with Councillor Waters, is on the one hand, the council wants to support businesses to survive in Middlesbrough, and that's often dependent upon having customers. But on the other hand, we want to also ensure that we get the right levels of public protection and social distancing in place. And those two things occasionally don't equate very well together. So we've worked very close with businesses at how we do that and ensure the social distancing, and providing reassurance to workers in the town centre and to shoppers and people visiting. And one example of that we put, for example, I think we've put 8 hygiene and sanitation stations around in different locations in the town centre. We've now reopened the car parks, but we've had no regime of charging. We are reviewing that in August. The bus station is now reopened with a two-way control system of a very sort of sensible barrier system down the middle of the bus station forecourt, which I think when I was in there last week worked very effectively. And we've been working to try and provide information to private landlords and operators of businesses to try and ensure that they get given the best possible guidance on how to achieve social distancing. We're providing public information. We did provide, in the first few weeks after the 15th of June, an enhanced town centre ambassador service using primarily staff who were under-deployed in their own services, and they came in and worked around the town centre to help ensure social distancing and advise visitors to the town centre on any issues they had in terms of how to achieve social distancing. One interesting development, which is about to be launched fully in the middle of March, is that we've introduced a town centre app. I'm not a big technology person myself, but lots of people use apps, and this will provide information to people about how a variety of aspects about how to work, function in the town centre whilst achieving social distancing, etc., which businesses are open and when. So we move on to the next one, Caroline. Just as an example, you would have seen around the town, it went in, unfortunately, the floor signage went in a couple of days before the barriers where it became apparent, but we introduced a system of keeping to the left, pavement markings, and eye level markings, helping people to see how to operate. And we also introduced a few weeks ago some barriers at key points around the town centre. We did introduce more barriers, but because of complaints of businesses that they really were inhibiting trade, we recalibrated that, but we still do have barriers in the town centre. And just highlighted on your screen now is a picture of a sanitation station. On the screen now is a picture of some of the floor markings. And we enhanced those again about 3 weeks ago. So looking at performance, this is based on evidence that we've been gathering. Social distancing is well observed by most. The vast majority of visitors in the town centre are trying to ensure social distancing. It isn't easy where you've got lots of crossover points, people coming out of premises, etc., but most people are trying to comply with that. The mood around the town centre throughout the recovery period has been calm and very respectful, and the residents of the town, visitors to the town, have been very, very responsive to the needs of social distancing. When we first reopened on the 15th of June, there were large queues at Primark and Sports Direct, as there were throughout the UK. They were sensibly managed in the main, and the stores were responsive to getting queuing systems. The one for Sports Direct did create some initial concern in the way it crisscrossed the street on Corporation Road, but that subsequently we don't get those levels of queues anymore. and footfall was quite high that day. Footfall has levelled off. There was an initial surge of people wanting to get back into town and get those items that they were needing. The sanitation stations have not necessarily been particularly well used, but what they have done is provided a level of reassurance to people using the town centre that there is that. And actually, we just had a request last week from the Dundas arcade if they could have a sanitation at their entrance to the shopping centre, which is a good sign, recognition from the private sector of the effectiveness of that. We've now taken away the ambassadors, but we have an enhanced presence of wardens in the town centre, particularly because of the reopening of the licensed premises. I think as an observation, we are noticing, and it's not just in Middlesbrough, this is a wider issue, people's adherence to social distancing has been loosening a little bit in recent times. And obviously, we're still trying to ensure that we're putting all the necessary advice in place to ensure that. Toilet issue has been an ongoing matter, and we have reopened toilets in the bus station. We did open up the toilets in the town hall as well. Has to say they weren't particularly well used actually, but they were available for customers. And if we can move on, Caroline. In terms of hospitality, this created quite a lot of concern for us and for other agencies in terms of the reopening. I think this is nationally. There was a concern that there would be gatherings of people occurring and a huge swathe of people coming out. But that really never did translate on the 4th of July. Premises have been operating very strict regimes. The numbers of people coming in have not been as great as maybe what people and the police in particular were envisaging. The government did put in this area quite detailed guidance in place for businesses to ensure that they were operating in a manner that didn't allow for gatherings to occur. And as I said, it's how you balance public safety against the economic recovery and number of people that businesses need to have in to make themselves viable. The government has just introduced new licensing laws, excuse me, to fast track the ability for business premises to have outdoor seating, i.e. bars, restaurants, and we've been working very closely, and I know there's a question later which we'll cover at that time about Baker and Bedford Street. Those are examples of where we've tried to provide opportunities for more outdoor seating, and we work very closely, I think, with virtually all licensed premises in the town centre to achieve that. But that's been based on giving each licensee a clear expectancy. If they are to use outdoor spaces, we've given them very clear standards on the license that will be provided, that of the things that they need to adhere to ensure safety of both the people working there and the visitors. So we are working proactively to try and support street outdoor seating. And ensure, though, that it's properly and well managed, but putting in place a proper enforcement regime for business premises who do not comply. We actually launched the outdoor seating approach with businesses on the 6th of July because of the concerns of police at the 4th of July, which was when businesses were allowed to reopen, that they didn't want to encourage outdoor gatherings. And outdoor seating can be used from 12 noon to 10 p.m. The operators take the full responsibility for the areas in front of their premises that are allotted to them and any seating that's allowed. For some business premises, the council has been able to provide picnic benches free of charge. We know this is a really hard time for many of those businesses, and those benches will be reused and be very cost effectively provided, and we can use those in our parks and areas if and when obviously social distancing is eased and there's no longer a need for outdoor seating. Businesses are meant to be and regularly are about maintaining a register for customers for track and trace, and I hope that's been, and obviously we would look to enforce where that's not been properly put in place, and we put additional security patrols in place as well alongside the police, and the warden hours have been extended to allow for that. In terms of grants going out, We've been directly involved in the delivery of grants of over £22 million going out to businesses, and also the government has provided a wide range of loans. There's a lot of advice being going out from businesses from different aspects, including support not only from the Combined Authority but Teesside University. We work closely with all possible agencies such as the Chamber of Commerce, Federation of Small Businesses, and we've wherever possible provided all the effort and support to work collaboratively with colleagues at the Tees Valley Combined Authority, who also have provided grant aid support directly themselves. We can move on to the next one. So we're undertaking a formal evaluation, which we will complete at the end of July and report back to the Middlesbrough Gold Recovery Group in early August, so we can assess the impacts and what needs to be done to go forward to help the town centre recovery occur within the social distancing and public protection guidelines. We are anticipating that there will be some casualties in the business world as a consequence of this. We're seeing that some companies have reduced staffing levels already. Furloughs maybe are masking the issues at the moment. But we are obviously, other than what's happening at a national level, we're keeping a very close eye on the performance of businesses and the issues arising. But we do feel that nationally and locally there will be some business closures, and I think that last week I think it was noted that Bistro Pierre has closed several of their restaurants nationally and put them up for sale. And so cash flow will be a major concern for many businesses. And one of the key aspects that we're trying to do to help ensure is that customers have the confidence to return to the town centre in a safe manner. And just only today, for example, we're working with the Cleveland Centre to try and look at if there's a possibility that they can reintroduce some seating that can be appropriately managed, but can help people with mobility difficulties to take a break whilst they're walking around the centre. We are seeing that there is some still market interests out there. Some commercial lettings are still being proactively pursued in the marketplace. There are new business opportunities emerging. So, Caroline, if we can just move on. So I think really that we covered about the town centre recovery. I think when Tony's obviously on the next item, Tony Parkinson, where he's looking at the wider Middlesbrough-wide recovery, there are a lot more areas. This is just one component of what we've been looking at in terms of recovery. And I don't know if Councillor Waters, if there's anything that you'd wish to add to about that, because you've been proactively involved in the working group.
Absolutely. Is it okay if I just comment on the end of that, Chair?
Of course, Councillor Waters.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one thing that has to be about this, I think our council staff have just been absolutely magnificent. People have been seconded into roles and moved around within the council to actually facilitate all of this happening. We were one of the first in the area to get things sorted, to have things put in place. I think that the work that Kevin, their teams, Debbie Ingoldsby, Janet Savage, all their teams have just been superb. And I really would just like to say that thanks to them, we still have a hell of a lot of businesses operating in Middlesbrough now that wouldn't be here if they didn't expedite this as quickly as what they did. So from my point of view, it has been fantastic. And just to add on to the end of the report there, one thing that has been highlighted with a lot of businesses within the town centre, that although yes, footfall is down, people are being sensible with going into the town. So where it's prior to this, people have entered the town centre for maybe 2-3 times a week. They're cutting that down to one spend a week. But that spend's a bigger spend. So it's not necessarily, yes, football may be down. However, spend per head over the course of the week isn't necessarily down, is what we're seeing from a lot of these businesses as well, which I think is a really positive aspect of this. I think people are just being sensible. They're listening to the rules. They're listening to what we've put in place. And like I said, the main thing that I would just like to say is thank you to the teams, because they have been absolutely superb.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Can I just thank Kevin for a very comprehensive presentation and I know members have received a copy of the presentation. So we will now go to questions for Kevin and Councillor Waters. The first question I got from Councillor Story. There's discretionary business grants, Councillor Story.
Thanks, Chair. I might leave that one because I think we both received some information earlier, which actually answered that question. So that's fine. Could I ask my next one? Is that okay?
Yeah, your next one is that the one on engaging with local businesses?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, how have we engaged with major local businesses such as Debenhams, Marks and Spencer's, Boots and others to clarify their position in terms of the premises in the town? Clearly, the expectation in light of recent purchase of properties like House of Fraser is that we need to plan for the eventuality that perhaps they won't be there long term. Are we working closely with the key businesses to support them and encourage their retention in the town? I'm aware as a ward councillor that Debbie Ingoldesby and the town centre management team and others have done tremendous work with Marks and Spencer's and other key operators within Middlesbrough. But I just wondered if you could sort of give us a bit more detail about how they stand and how our engagement's been working with them.
Absolutely. I think we engage with all the businesses on a regular basis. They're involved in our recovery groups, the shopping centres. I can't go into detail as to exactly what the plans are for all these businesses, as there is sensitivities there with some of them right now. But the way that things are looking, and looking at other town centres across the country that have already announced closures, we don't necessarily have that right now in Middlesbrough, and it is a fairly positive outlook. The businesses that are here, for what we know right now, are looking like going to be here for over a longer term, and I hope that is the case. Like I said, this is an evolving situation right now, and again, there is talks in with all of these businesses. All of the shopping centres are in regular discussion with ourselves, and we will keep discussing with them to ensure that this is an attractive proposition for them to be in Middlesbrough Town Centre. Hopefully what they see with the council and the way that we've done things and the way that we've worked with these businesses to show them that the town centre is safe and open for business will encourage them that having their businesses in Middlesbrough is something that is they need, as we need them, they need us as well. We've got, like I say, some fantastic businesses that we are going to keep. It's just going to be a case of ongoing conversation and see where we go.
Can I, if it's okay, Councillor Waters, just supplement that? There's two levels of work in Councillor Story. I think you mentioned the work of the town centre team, and they have been fantastic. So I will name check a company here. So when Marks and Spencer's, one of the ones you put on the list, contact the council about issues to do with click and collect on Bolco Street, there's an immediate response to that. And that's not just because they're a big business. We've been responsive, hopefully, to businesses of all sizes in that regard. But there is a second level to this, and that's working with the businesses at a strategic level, which is an ongoing process, which is certainly very much still at the forefront of the way that we're working. And that is dealing with them at a strategic head office level to ensure that every assurance is put in place and being proactive in terms of making sure that there's a strong, coherent response in Middlesbrough. And part of that is our response to the Future High Street Funds, where we will be one of the first councils in the country to submit our bid. We were already put that into central government. Not many local authorities are that far advanced, and I think we hopefully will be able to draw down resources quickly. Those messages to businesses are really important. It gives them confidence, as Councillor Waters is saying, to stay in Middlesbrough, work in Middlesbrough and invest in Middlesbrough, and hopefully we'll be retaining more businesses as a consequence.
Can I bring in Councillor Coop and then Councillor Walker? So Councillor Coop first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I say that I'm glad that a lot of restaurants and pubs are now opening up, and the ones I've been in have been doing things absolutely correctly. But I have noticed recently that they used to take details when you went in. So you went in, they'd take your name and address. But they're now saying they've been told that's not mandatory, and in fact, it's not necessary. I just wonder how the track and trace system would work for businesses, because obviously they don't understand where it is. So what advice can you give them? Is it mandatory? Is it voluntary? And if so, how's the track and trace system going to work?
Do you want me to come in on that one?
Yeah, if you want to start, Ashley.
Yeah, again, there's legislation in place for these businesses to follow. And we have our public health teams going around businesses in Middlesbrough right now, across Middlesbrough, to facilitate that actually happening, whether that be through an app that the business uses itself. I know myself went out for a meal last week. We had to register through an app as to being there. So some of the businesses, yes, they won't be taking names and addresses in a physical format, but they will have that information as you're on the app. If they're not taking any information whatsoever, I'm not 100%, but like I say, it is legislation right now, and it is legislated that they should really be doing that. And again, our public health teams will work with these businesses to make sure that they're doing everything to stay compliant during this.
I think, Kevin, Councillor Coote, what we will do is I'll clarify the exact legal position on that for you, because I do think it's discretionary at the moment, but is coming into law, as Councillor Ward said. I think that puts the onus on the business, though. If you do find somebody visiting their premises COVID positive and they haven't got that system in place, they're going to have to make an awful lot of effort to try and find out who visited their premises using CCTV, etc. But we'll come back with a written answer to you in the next few days on that to clarify the points that you've raised.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. One of the things I'm wondering about is the fact that now it's mandatory to wear a mask in the shops. How do you think the shops are going to cope with that? Because that is part of the law now, that they wear a mask in the shops. Do you think there's going to be a good deal of compliance? Or do you think that that is going to be a problem for each of the individual shops? Thank you.
Again, yes, it is difficult. Thank you, Councillor. It is a difficult one with this one, and it's going to be down to the shops themselves as to how they manage these situations initially. I would say that personally, we have people, ambassadors across the town, we have wardens around the town, we have Cleveland Police. I don't think we'll get to that point. I'm hoping we don't get to that point, as I believe that looking around the town, people have been absolutely fantastic with looking at what we're doing and how we're doing it, and people have been fairly compliant. People have been wearing masks without it being mandatory, without it just being guidance, and I think the sensible thing is that people will do that and they'll continue to do that. I don't think people are looking for aggro when they're going to town. They're not looking to have any issues when they're going to these shops. They want to go and get the shopping done at the end of the day. And like I say, from what we've seen, I think people will be compliant. I hope they will be anyway going forward.
I bring in Councillor Higgins. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm concerned about the wearing masks from tomorrow, because I spent most of yesterday on the phone talking to different people in the council, in the police, in the licensing, because I had 2 phone calls from residents who had been in a shop in my ward who'd said, you know, he was a bit worried because his wife was very ill and she was shielded. How are you going to cope on Friday with the masks? He said, oh, we're not going to comply. Now, I've been able to get back to that residence to say, with advice of the licensing and advice of the police and the council, that it is law. And if the shops don't comply, then the licensing can go to those shops. If somebody complains, that man is very worried about his wife. If he complains to the council, they'll get in touch with the licensing, and the licensing can go, and if they don't do as they're told, they can close the shop. So everybody's ready for any possibility. I just wanted to say that because I did spend a lot of time on the phone yesterday clarifying it, because some people are frightened, myself included, believe it or not.
Thank
you, Chair.
Again, on that point, Teresa, you're absolutely right. Thank you, Councillor. It's a case of, these businesses have been closed for a long time and have suffered financially for a long time. I think that the majority of businesses out there are going to be savvy enough to know that this is something that's in their interest to remain open. So none of these businesses are going to damage themselves by allowing this to happen. So like I say, from what we've seen anyway, people have been fantastic with their compliance in Middlesbrough regardless. So I personally would say that yes, it's a concern. It will be an ongoing concern. But I do believe that, like I said, these businesses will act in a proper manner.
Councillor Thompson, I think the points raised by councillors here about wearing a mask are excellent, because what we have been able to do throughout this crisis is to have to be responsive to circumstances that are arising. And I mentioned a few examples in the presentation of where we've had to adapt literally within 24 hours or less to circumstances arising. And what does strike me, if there is a lot of issues around non-compliance of the wearing of masks in the town centre, then we need to be working closely with the shopping centres and their management, the street wardens, Cleveland Police and the shops to try and ensure that we're supporting businesses who are struggling to address any issue of non-compliance. But as Councillor Waters highlighted right at the beginning of his response, the citizens of the area have been fantastic so far. There's always going to be a few people who are not going to comply with what's asked for one reason or another. But what we will do is that if there is a major problem arising, we will be able to respond. We need to respond to that. And as Councillor Higgins highlighted, this is not just in the town centre, it's obviously throughout town. And if people have concerns, then we need to be getting that out through our media to ensure that people can raise concerns where they feel uncomfortable going into a premise. An essential shop they need for their day-to-day activities, and they're feeling that they're not being, it's not non-compliant. So rest assured, any councillor who has those concerns, please raise them with us.
Thank you, Kevin, for the clarification. Can I bring in Councillor Story? You've got a question around the Neptune Centre, Councillor Story.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think we were all surprised to hear, including the ward councillors, even the mayor seemed uncertain by his own executive's proposal. Perhaps you could elaborate on how much he knew, to close the Neptune Centre until April 2021. It's a leisure centre in an area of very poor public health outcomes, and it's my view we must do all we can to reopen the Neptune at the earliest opportunity for staff, businesses and for local people. But what are the plans for businesses based in the centre, and what assurances can you provide that their status is secure?
Thank you, Councillor Story. Yes, it was an issue last week. It did come up, and I 100% wholeheartedly agree that the Neptune Centre is an absolutely vital facility. It's not just one ward that area covers. I'm the Thorn ward next door, and I got absolutely inundated again. Another ward that needs this centre and has a lot of users use that centre. Just with regards to the question you'd asked about the grants previously, we have paid grants to within them businesses, to the businesses themselves. So two of the businesses in there have received their own grants. So we are supporting the businesses there, and the businesses obviously are aware that we will provide that. As to the centre closing, there is going to be a meeting tomorrow, which I'm sure you're aware of, with regards to the discussion with regards to this. I believe it needs to open as soon as possible, and I think we'll be pushing to get this open as expeditiously as possible. I'd say September, but again, I couldn't say I want it open as soon as possible. But that decision will be made tomorrow. I think we'll have some clearer outcomes tomorrow as to exactly what will happen. As for the business, the question with regards to the businesses, I can't offer any business a 100% guarantee right now. But all I can say is that we will support them in whatever way possible to get the centre opened and to get them trading again as soon as possible.
Can I bring in Councillor Walker? Councillor Walker, do you have a question?
No, it's okay. That's been answered. Thank you. Within that answer. Thank you.
Right, can I move on to the next question? It's from Councillor Story. Would you like to ask your next question, Councillor Story?
Yeah, thanks. I'd just like to thank Councillor Waters for the comments he made there about businesses. I think that'll help reassure people that you've got that interest in making sure it opens as soon as possible. I personally have been contacted by neighbours and other people who know people who work there, and it has genuinely concerned a lot of people, not to mention the staff as well. Yeah, my next question is what support is being provided to businesses around the town outside of the town centre on shopping parades and smaller shopping centres to help them provide services to local people safely and in line with government guidance?
Thank you, Councillor. Again, everything that we can as a council we're doing here. I've personally, prior to lockdown, went down and gave pretty much every person in Middlesbrough could my contact details. I've been liaising with businesses across the town, not just the town centre. Probably a good 300-400 businesses I've contacted or been in contact with during this to help and provide support where possible, to make sure that they got the grants, to make sure they knew they were eligible to get the grants. Middlesbrough Council's been fantastic in basically advertising these grants and making them as absolutely as accessible as possible to every single business in Middlesbrough. They've worked with numerous different people and numerous different government organisations as well. So we have things like the Valuation Office, which we have to liaise with, and they are not expeditious in any way, shape or form. But there have been during this because we've put pressure on and we've made sure that the businesses that have needed the support or not necessarily had the correct details straight away to receive the grant, we've made sure that they've had that and the support's been there. There's been numerous posts from Middlesbrough Council and other council and the executive about the ways to claim this money and made sure that it is as accessible as possible for absolutely everybody. So there has been numerous different ways in which we've communicated to the businesses across Middlesbrough that we can support them and we will support them. As you've seen, that there's numerous other things that have been put in place. So we have things like the Buy Borough campaign. We've got over 100 businesses signed up to that, not necessarily in the town centre itself. We're offering one-on-one business support where we can to these businesses, again, to help them to make sure that they do reopen after this. I'd be foolish to say that we're not going to lose any businesses during this, but while we can make sure that we can lose as few as possible, that's exactly what we will do as a council and as councillors and as an executive to provide this support. There's 5 or 6 different partnerships that we've entered into with different organisations across Middlesbrough to make sure that we can provide this support. We work closely with the Tees Valley Combined Authority to link in with them and link businesses in with them. And where there's not support available directly from the council or TVCA, there is government support available at a national level for other people that we have liaised with these companies and spoken to. I've done that personally to make sure that they're aware that there is support, even if it's not from us, the TVCA, there has still been a massive amount of support provided.
Can I bring in Councillor Higgins and then I'll bring Kevin back in? So Councillor Higgins and then Kevin.
Yeah,
Councillor Higgins.
Just to say, Chair, I know of a small business on Linthorpe Road, but it's just before the park. And she was very worried. She has a hairdressing and she was very worried. But I was speaking to her the other day and she was absolutely thrilled of the service she's had from Middlesbrough Council. It's enabled her to open a shop last week and to keep going, and she said there's another grant that she'd be able to get and she has no further worries that she'll have to close. She has been in that shop for about 15-20 years now, so she was very happy. So she did say, if you get the chance, will you say thank you? So I'm saying thank you. She's going to write a letter as well. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Kevin, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to mention really some core facts in there to help Councillor's story with the issue. There's been nearly 2,000 business grants. I think it's 1,977 business grants awarded at the last count in Middlesbrough, of which 377 of those went to retail and hospitality businesses. £17 million has been given out to Middlesbrough businesses in grants. So everything Councillor Water was saying, I just thought sometimes the data is really helpful to back up what Councillor Waters is saying. There's also substantial loans being made available from businesses as well, but we don't have that data directly, but gives you an impression of the scale of the response that's been instigated.
If I may, Chair, just very briefly, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the answer. The main thing I was trying to get into is the idea of the grants and the support and even like PPE and public health support, really. being cascaded out of the town centre, because even in my ward, outside of the centre itself, we have lots of shops on Waterloo Road, Victoria Road, other places where, you know, there's a collection, a dense collection of shops, and we want to make sure that it goes to everybody. And I think you can see from the list of grants that that's happened. Just it's one of the things that we're going to hopefully be looking at through the Regen Scrutiny panel as well, to make sure that we look at how every business, small businesses outside of the town centre and the economic hub there actually do benefit from all that support. So yeah, thanks for the answers, appreciate it.
Councillor Story, it's back to you again about a question on Baker Street and Bedford Street. Would you like to comment on that?
Thank you. Baker Street and Bedford Street have been temporarily closed during the COVID outbreak. When will they reopen, and has the closure achieved its stated objectives? Businesses and residents have raised concerns about the importance of access for themselves, their clients, to businesses that have medical need and patients as well. So I just wondered if you could update me on that, please.
Councillor Waters, I've got a very latest update.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
On this. On Monday, the town centre team visited every business that was available to discuss the issues and concerns that they were facing. As a consequence, this week, a survey's gone out to every business on Baker and Bedford Street, asking them for their views on the options, and that includes remaining closed, but also the potential of reopening the streets to for some traffic and also some street parking as well. That the survey results will be available shortly. Hopefully by the end of this week we'll get all the survey results in. They're coming in rapidly at the moment, and we'll be able to consider that and make a decision next week. But I think the important aspect about this was to make sure that we got a balanced view from every business and their issues and concerns that are rising. So we've gone very much into that consultative engagement, collaborative approach with every business in the area.
Can I bring in Councillor Coop and then Councillor Story? Councillor Coop, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Chair. Early on in the crisis, there was various businesses that didn't fit through the criteria. They slipped through the net. I just want to ask how this has changed, and is the council trying to help all businesses in the town, large or small? Because I do remember there was businesses that just didn't meet the criteria. They still had people employed, they still had problems, and I just wondered how this has been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So with that one, there still is businesses that have fell through the gaps. We are trying where we can to direct them to the support that they require. And again, I'm in contact with a couple of them businesses that have fell through, that don't fall into any of the specific criteria. What we were given is the ability to issue discretionary grants. However, I will say that was a very difficult process. They weren't necessarily discretionary. There was a lot of criteria within that had to be fulfilled. So again, certain businesses have been left out. Very few, I will add to that. However, we are working with them to point them to the people and the central government that is able to support them, and we will continue to do so to make sure that they are able to continue trading. I know that one of the particular businesses in your ward that has been in contact with myself, and again, we've been in regular contact to try and make sure that we can support him and help where we can.
So Thompson, just on the facts to support Councillor Waters' statement there, we have given out 66 discretionary grants worth over £400,000, and we've got another 160 discretionary grants that we're currently considering, and we do have resources allocated to be able to obviously furnish many more of those grants. That was a report that went through executive on the discretionary grants. So to hopefully answer Councillor Coop's, it's something now that we're ongoing, and there will be more awards. And again, one thing is constantly re-evaluating every week through the goal process of where we are in terms of award of discretionary grants.
Yes, thank you. Can I just follow that up, Chair? Yes, I'm very happy with the particular business in my ward. It was very good. You did sort it out, and I'm extremely grateful. But I do know the business in the town which are still suffering. So I just hope this can be addressed. Thank you.
Can I just ask Councillor Story, do you want to come back in, and then I'll take Councillor Branson?
Yeah, just
Councillor Story.
very briefly, Chair. I appreciate what Kevin said about the questionnaire. Is there any chance, Kevin, you might be able to provide me with a copy of the questionnaire and just a little bit of background in written form so that I can relay that to any residents or businesses who've contacted me? Just because it'd be useful for me to give them a bit of information about what our plans are and how we're trying to bring them into the process. Obviously, they'll have seen the questionnaire, but it will be for my correspondence purposes to say that I've got something about it.
Yeah, I'll certainly be able to get you the plans that have gone with the questionnaire, Councillor Story, tonight. And I'm happy for that to go to everybody. I don't actually personally have a copy of the questionnaire electronically. I might, if the officers are not available this evening, I might have to get that to you tomorrow morning.
That'll be fine. That'll be lovely. Thanks. Cheers.
Mr. Branson, did you have a question?
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the businesses in my area, a nursery, has already had a small business grant, I think it is, for £10,000, if I remember rightly. They were told that they could apply for a further grant by one person, but then someone else has said, no, you only get the one. I wonder whether, either Kevin or Ashley could let me know what the situation is in this. If you've got one grant, does that mean you still can put in for another, or is it simply one grant per business?
Again, right now, I do believe that the grants that we've been given, especially the discretionary grants, it would literally be that grant that you'd be available to. If you've had the small business one, that wouldn't be necessarily be entitled. However, I do know that there will be things come forward through central government for businesses that have had a longer need for support, like nurseries and stuff like that. So again, I don't have an exact answer as to if they will be. Hopefully there will be more coming forward, and if it does fall within the remit of being able to be processed through the discretionary grant fund, then we want to be able to do that and support these businesses.
Kevin, did you want to add to that?
No, I was thanking Scott for putting me on mute. I think maybe, sorry, there was one. If the details of that business could be sent to me, we will look into that. Sometimes business structures are complex. There could be more than one business trading out of a premises, for example. And sometimes that when you dig into these things, there might be eligibility that could be there. But we'll have another look at that if Councillor Branson could forward me just even a name and address, and we'll chase that one up.
I will do. Yes, thank you.
Councillor Branson, I believe you've got a question now regarding the Rainbow Centre. Would you like to ask your question, Councillor Branson?
Can you hear me? Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right,
yes. Yeah.
Similar to a question that we had before. This is another business I have within the ward based in the Parkway Centre. It's actually a hairdressing salon called Cutting Corners, and they actually have been renting out premises in the Rainbow Centre now for several years, nearly 10 years, I believe. And of course, the problem is that they're not able to open because the Rainbow Centre is open, even though they do have external access without having to go through the leisure centre. But they're still being told that they can't open till the leisure centre's open. What they're concerned about is the loss of business. That in fact they'll lose their clientele over the next few weeks if they can't open. A lot of other hairdressers have opened, but they're being told they have to wait until September. They're very concerned that by September they will have already lost significant amount of business. Just wonder what can be done to help businesses like this that depend very much on retaining customer loyalty. Thank you.
I'm happy, Councillor Waters. If again, Councillor Branson, sorry, I missed I didn't note down the name of the business, but if they have a separate access that they can use then there might be a possibility there that they can use that access without going through the centre. And certainly it's a discussion that we can have with our property services team with regard to whether there is any possibility that we can look at this business being supported to reopening. And I'll certainly raise that. Sorry, if you could just give me the name of the business again.
Yeah, certainly. The name of the business is Cutting Corner. And they do have separate access. And yes, are you going to get in touch with them, or do you want me to get them to get in touch with you?
I will get in touch with them, but I will also speak to obviously our property services and centre management people about whether there's any potential ways to accommodate that going forward.
That's lovely. If you can keep me in the loop, I'll
keep you in. I'll keep you in. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Have we got any more questions then for Councillor Ashley Waters or Kevin Parks? No? Well, I'd like to thank Kevin and Councillor Ashley Waters for that presentation and answering the questions. You're welcome to stay. If not, if you want to leave, you can leave. But thanks once again, much appreciated. Well, go on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6. And it's Middlesbrough Council COVID-19 response and test, track and trace. And that's the Chief Executive, Tony Parkinson. Tony, have we got Tony Parkinson?
Yeah, I'm here, Chair. I've got a brief presentation which I'll share if that's okay. I'll share my screen and happy to take questions at any point in the presentation.
Right. Tony, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Can people see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, great. So what I was going to just touch on today for you was the current COVID prevalence in the town. Got a section on finance, powers which were assigned last week, the planning on return of council staff, and then I was going to give you an overview of decisions that have been made at our gold meetings over the last 4 weeks. If there's anything that you want me to cover that I haven't there, I'm happy to answer questions on those and cover them as best as I can. So the figures as of yesterday show that the total number of positive cases from testing in Middlesbrough is at 963, and that includes now both Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 testing. Pillar 1 testing is testing in hospital settings or NHS settings. Pillar 2 testing is the work carried out by Deloitte's at regional test centres and the like. In the last 7 days, we've had 8 positive tests, so the rate of infection in the town is steadied at a very low rate at the moment. And in terms of the government indicator, that gives us a rate of 683 positive infections per 100,000 population, which places us 13th in the league table for upper tier local authorities, of which there are just over 150. But previously, we've been reporting that we were kind of in the top 4, and we are in the top 4 when we look just at Pillar 1 testing, so testing in a hospital or NHS setting. When we look at wider, the wider test, those that are people who are asymptomatic and who go for a test or get sent a test at home, we're much lower in the league table. I'm not sure what we can draw from this, but we've been looking at this, and we think that we're always, if we don't have people engaging in Pillar 2 testing, so actively seeking a test if they're asymptomatic, and predominantly the people who are being tested are people who are ill in hospital, then we're bound to be high. So what we're doing at the moment in terms of local outbreak planning and such like is trying to increase that rate of Pillar 2 tests so we can get more of the community tested. The temperature guns that we've got deployed are aware of engaging people in a conversation on that and trying to promote testing. The fact that we've now got a regional test centre within the town is good. And we're also have started to discuss with the Department of Health and Social Care, Middlesbrough being part of a pilot for what they call hyper-local testing, which is where we take testing to the community rather than asking the community to take themselves to testing. So we can have pop-ups in, supermarket car parks and places like that. And it looks like we'll probably get one as a first step in the heart of the town centre in Captain Cook Square within the next couple of weeks. But you can see there through April and May we had a steady increase, and then it's levelled off through June to July. So that's the prevalence. That's all I was going to cover on that. But I'm happy to answer any queries or questions if anyone has any.
Could I ask a question, please?
I'll take Councillor Higgins and then I'll take Councillor Saunders. Councillor Higgins.
Yes, thank you, Chair. These people in the town centre with the little guns, and they say, do you want to test? Did they test your temperature, Tony?
Yeah. What they do is they take your temperature. One of the symptoms of COVID is a raised temperature.
Yeah.
So if somebody's got a raised temperature, then there would be a discussion that an individual would got strips to say you've got a high temperature. Doesn't mean you've got COVID, but we would recommend that you go for a test.
Yeah, but the problem is, Tony, my husband got a test, and I got a test because I'd had to take him down to Specsavers. And the number that they give us, and we told our daughter, she's a nurse in New Zealand, she said, don't be so silly, you can't have been that. If you were that, you would be dead, because it was so low. So
I don't know. I mean, I can't comment on that. If you can send me your figures, I can get someone to look at it, Teresa. But we've taken.
Hang on there, Teresa.
So we.
Tony, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, we've. Sorry, Chair. We've taken over 1,500 temperatures. The guns are one of the better guns that you can buy to take temperature, and they are reliable. They do need using in a certain way to give a correct reading, of course. But I think the main point I would want to make is the guns are not really being deployed for a clinical reason. The guns are being deployed as a way of having a conversation with the public about COVID, increasing awareness in the public around COVID, reminding them of the need for good hygiene, and promoting engagement with testing if people become asymptomatic. Is that okay?
yes, thank you.
The chair's on you.
Councillor Saunders, do you want to ask a question? I'll take Councillor Saunders and then Councillor Hill.
No, I didn't want to question. I just must have been. I just sit back down. Okay.
Did you get that? It was quite difficult. I couldn't really hear that. Tony, did you get that question?
I'm sorry, Chair. No, I never.
No, Councillor Saunders, you couldn't get that question. Could you repeat your question, please? There's quite a lot of interference. Whether everybody's mics off.
Chair, there's a lot of interference. You were breaking up. I didn't request to ask a question. That's what I said. Thank you.
All right, sorry about that then. Councillor Coop, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I have requested a couple of times to see if we can get a better breakdown of the figures, because if you look at the ward of Stainton, Thornton, Hemlington, there was 22 deaths recorded, and in Colby, for example, there was 20, I believe it was 26, which is the worst in the Tees Valley. Would it still be possible to get a breakdown of this? I presume some's care homes, some is in the community, etc. Because if you're going to start doing some testing, it looks like that we're one of the worst areas to do, when that's probably not the case. So will it be possible finally to get a breakdown of the areas, Tony? Thank you.
Councillor, yes. So we have previously we've been provided information a kind of super at Middlesbrough or at Best Ward area. With effect from this week, we've started to get the information on individual postcode level. So that means that we can now start to look, and we can kind of heat map it on a GIS system to look at where positive cases are, because you're absolutely right. it can look like there's a really high prevalence in somewhere like Stainton and Thornton, but there's a heavy concentration of care homes there. So it's easy to be thrown by the data at a superficial level. But now we're able to do that kind of investigation on the figures, and at the local area control strategic command group, which I chair, we'll be getting that so that we can see what is emerging, because the whole sense of test and trace and local outbreak control is if to not get ahead of COVID, to at least get alongside it, so that we can prevent outbreaks, and we can only do that with that level of granularity. So we literally from Monday we've started to receive that data. But at the moment we're running at a rate of around about 1 positive test per day, so there's not a lot of information at this point in time.
Yes, thank
Councillor
you.
Walsh, do you want to come in, Councillor Walsh?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. One of the things I've noticed, or I've been told, there's a lot of interference there. One of the things I've been told is there are actually teams going out testing, not testing, I should say, just with the it's awareness, as you quite rightly said, Tony, with the temperature guns, and they're giving hand sanitizer out and giving advice. I think it's really, really good. They've been doing it in the Parkway, apparently. I haven't been, so and that is good, because you're going out where the people are gathering in large numbers, and I think that's brilliant. So well done on that. I don't know whose idea it was, but is it our idea or a National Health idea or what? So, but it's really good to see that.
I'm going to claim the credit. That was my idea, Councillor.
Okay, I'll give you the credit then. Thank you, Toby.
Tony, do you want to go back to the presentation? Thank you.
Yeah, we've still got the presentation. I'll move on to finance now. Okay, so in terms of finance, the government provided direct grant for the business grants that you've previously spoken about. They've provided the council with £10.7 million at the moment for the direct costs associated with COVID. As I said, they have provided the money for grants to businesses, and we did receive an allocation this week of, or last week, of £240,000 specifically for dealing with hunger. But for general COVID response, the amount we've been provided is 10.7 million. The big debate that's been going on for some time is the impact on our income base. And so a couple of weeks ago, the government announced a deal, and it will reimburse us the first 5% of any, well, the first 5% of any lost income we meet. The government will then meet 75% of the remainder, and they announced something on council tax losses by up to 3 years. So I'll just talk through those in relation to Middlesbrough. So at this point in time, the direct cost to the council is estimated at 7.3 million. The government have given us 10.7 million, so that will cover all of those costs. There's nothing to contribute from the council, and there is still £3.4 million available that we can assign to that. Whether or not that will be enough remains to be seen, because what we've not costed in yet are all of the costs of recovery activity, and we should have those in the next couple of weeks. In terms of loss of income, so from venues closing and such like, our current estimate is 6.9 million. And using the formula above, where the council meets the first 5% and the government meets 75% of the remainder, that means that the government will give us £4.9 million of that loss, and we would need to find 2 million. The COVID pandemic's had a massive impact on our ability to save, either because reviews haven't been able to take place because staff are working from home and as senior managers are directed on COVID-related activity, or because we simply haven't been able to get on with implementing solutions and such like. So we think in this year we'll probably under-deliver on our savings targets by about 2.3 million. The government doesn't allocate any money towards that. That's a cost that we will have to bear. And we're currently predicting that this year we will see around about £3.9 million worth of council tax less than budgeted collected. Now, under the old regime, you would have to budget for that 3.9 million in the following year. So we would have had to recover that 3.9 million in the financial year 2021-22, and therefore come up with savings that total 3.9 million. What the government have done is they've allowed up to 3 years for that. So you can do that anywhere you want. You can still collect, you can still look to recoup the 3.9 million in 1 year. You can do it over 2, or you can do it over 3. So it kind of smooths it if you want to smooth it. So overall, we're estimating currently that the cost or loss, if you look at income, to the council is about 20.4 million. So the impact is just over 20 million. The government are making available 12.2, and that leaves about 8.2 million pounds that we are now factoring into the medium-term financial plan refresh. A lot of information there, but happy to allow people time to look at that and ask any questions.
So we just carry on with the presentation and ask questions at the end. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of powers, new powers. I've only got a little bit of information in this. The newer powers were signed by government with effect from the 18th of July 2020. So what that means is that we are able to close specific premises where we feel that there is a COVID risk. We can shut public outdoor spaces, and we can cancel events. What we're currently doing, because obviously this only came out at the back end of last week, so we're currently assessing the governance options in relation to actually exercising those powers. So we're looking to have those by next week. So Charlotte Benjamin and her team are looking at how we would, what the decision-making route would be around the exercising of these powers. I've not got any more on that, but it's just to make you aware, we have got powers. We've not turned them on yet because at the moment, we're actually in a position whereby we're looking at how we use them. We should have that by next week, and I'm happy to bring that back at a later date. For some reason, I've lost my last slide, so I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully Gemma Cooper is still on the line, and she can put up the presentation that's got the detail on this slide around the return of council services. Just forgive me for a moment. I'll stop sharing, and Gemma can share the next slide.
Bear with me.
Can I just ask Tony, how long have we got left on the presentation?
Two slides.
Okay,
yeah. So one of the big tasks we're undertaking at the moment is the return of council staff. So we're looking at the return of council staff to central buildings in particular at the moment on a phased basis. And that's likely to commence in October 2020, subject to COVID prevalence at that point in time. With social distancing requirements, we'll have around about 50 to 60% reduction in the number of desks. But we can't fit the staff in our premises that we previously had in. So there's a number of policy and procedural decisions that have been made to implement to be able to kind of provide a logistically solid solution to this. So there will be an expectation of significant working from home. I think for as long as you can think, COVID's not going away quickly. So that, we're going to need staff to work from home, certainly up to 3 days a week on an ongoing basis. As part of that, we'll need to look at home workspace arrangements. So the council retains its liability under health and safety law for making sure that somebody's got an adequate workspace at home. So that will be based on a self-assessment, but it may well be that we get into the realm to provide desks and such, like ergonomically correct desks for people, or perhaps providing a grant of some sort to employees who are working from home. There will be obviously exclusions under certain conditions. So where people can't work at home, either because they might have lots of children there, and it might be impossible to concentrate. It might be that their health and well-being is suffering from having to work at home. We will have a process where people can be excluded from working from home. The desks will be booked out on a daily basis, so nobody will have a desk. Desks will be kind of warm, not hot desks. So you won't be changing desks by the hour, but you certainly would be booking a desk for the day, and then those desks would be sanitised at the end and the beginning of each day. We'll be looking at virtual meetings as standard. So we would only be looking to have physical meetings of teams and such like where it was absolutely required. And to facilitate all of this, we've got some desk booking software that will come in where people can go online, book a desk for the day. You can have a look, see what desk somebody is on, and it will the software that we've got there will also allow for a new access system as well. And we're now starting to look at a protocol for how we start to move to face-to-face meetings with clients in areas like adult social care and such like. So there'll be a policy framework that covers that, and then each professional discipline will undertake their own assessment of how best to facilitate face-to-face interaction with their clients within the policy that we've set. So we'll have a lot more information in about 2 to 3 weeks, and again, happy to bring that to a future meeting. And then my final slide. Decisions made in the last 4 weeks. So the temperature gun deployment, which we've spoken about. Face-to-face birth and death registrations. So we brought back the resumption of face-to-face registrations there. Reopening of parks buildings. We've also looked at the crematorium and capacity increases in there in light of new guidance from the government. We've looked at pedestrian flows around the bus station. It was one way in, one way out when it first opened, and we've since changed that. The reopening of playgrounds within our parks. We've had several discussions on the reopening of leisure centres. The last of those was last week, and there's a paper that's going tomorrow that I'm sure you're all aware of, that will have some further discussion, I'm sure. The reintroduction of bulky waste services, which came into effect this week. And then finally, the bus station and a proposal there for wearing of face masks in the bus station. So that's just a quick run through the decisions that have been made at our gold or recovery meetings in the last 4 weeks. And that's it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. I'll bring in Councillor Walker, and then I'll bring in Councillor Story. Councillor Walker,
thank you very much, Chair. Tony, I'm wondering about the libraries.
We've just made a decision today, Jeanette, that the libraries will open on the 4th of August.
4th of August, yeah. Right.
We literally just made that decision this afternoon.
Brilliant. Well done. Thank you very much. I can tell people now they've been moaning at me about their library books, etc. So thank you very much.
About the town hall.
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting loads of feedback. So I don't know if everyone can hear me, but yeah, Tony, I wanted to ask about the town hall and the court service. What was the council's involvement in the decision to hold court proceedings in the town hall? Did we have influence on the decision? What formal process did it go through? And are we getting paid for providing service to the courts?
Okay, thanks for that. An approach was made by the court system originally through the mayor, and it was then passed to Richard Horniman to deal with, who reported to our gold meeting. So Richard undertook the negotiation on that with Cushman and Wakefield, who were representing the courts, and it was approved at gold, and then subsequently through valuation and estates, as they had the delegated authority. The charge for hire is £80,000, and that's been agreed, and that's money that the council will receive.
Let's bring in Councillor Higgins, then Councillor Gard, and then Councillor Halawi. So Councillor Higgins.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Stories wants to ask another question.
Councillor Higgins, I asked if you wanted to come in. Councillor Higgins wants to ask a question.
Can I come in later, Chair? Because I've been listening that much. I forgot what I was going to ask, but I know I want to ask something, but later.
Right, thank you. I'll take Councillor Garvey, then Halawi, and then Councillor Story. So, Councillor Higgins.
Do you mean Councillor Garvey, Chair?
Not yet, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Garvey.
Thanks, Chair. Tony, I just wanted to go back on the bulky waste. Since we've announced we're going back to bulky waste collections, I've had, I would say, at least 6 phone calls from residents regarding mattresses. Now, I've done my homework and I've phoned, and I know we're not taking mattresses at the moment. But could you elaborate on why we're not taking mattresses at the moment? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think Jeff Field's on the call. I would have asked him to respond, Lee. We have discussed this. My understanding is that at this point in time, we're not allowed to. So the government are not permitting the collection of mattresses at this point in time. As soon as we're able to collect them, then of course we will.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yeah.
I just
a quick one.
Will it be very brief? I've got quite a lot of people questions, and I'm aware of. Yeah, very briefly.
Yeah. It's basically just to say. So, can you confirm for me, Tony, that it is a government decision? Thank you.
That's my understanding. Yes, at this point in time, but subsequent to this meeting, I'll double check and I'll send an email if that's not the case.
Right, can I Councillor Halawi?
Thank you, Chair. Tony, I think I understood that you said we're going to be left with an 8.2 million deficit. Is that right? In the financial situation?
When we count all of the financial impacts, Alma, yeah, that's correct. At this point in time, that's our estimate.
So how worried or concerned should we be about our ability to deal with this reduction or loss? I mean, how are we going to reduce services? How can we recover from this? Have you any examples you could give to talk about some strategies that might be being considered at the moment in view of this deficit?
So at this point in time, we're doing some scenario planning, but the idea is that we'll have a much firmer handle on the costs and the impacts, and a much firmer handle on what government will provide by September.
Okay.
So we're doing some scenario planning, but the intention is that we will report the full financial impact to executive in September, along with an outline plan to make good our budget in 2021-22 as required. So we're on with that work at the moment, but as you can imagine, it literally moves week on week at the moment. So that's our current estimate. I think it's fair to say there will be a shortfall because we know that we're going to have to pick up about just shy of 30% of lost income. We know that we're going to have to pick up the bill for any savings that we don't deliver this year. And we know we're going to have to pick up the bill for any reduction in council tax receipts.
All right, so Councillor Branson.
Thank you.
I'll bring in Councillor Higgins and then Councillor Story. So, Councillor Branson.
Yes, just a quick question on the risk assessments being carried out by staff. I'm just talking from the health and safety point of view. Are we going to actually do any home visits ourselves? And are we going to check any of these risk assessments? Because I'm just worried if we totally rely on staff doing their own risk assessments, we may have people doing risk assessments which are not adequate, and then if something goes wrong, the council ends up as being responsible for that, because they are, of course, responsible for people working from home.
Thanks, David. So John Armstrong is putting together the detail of that at the moment. If you've ever met John, you know he takes these issues very, very seriously, and I'm sure he'll be considering them in the proposal he puts forward.
I know John very well, and I'm chair of the Health and Safety Committee, and so me and John are in touch most of the time. Thanks.
Councillor Higgins, did you want to come back in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Tony, I was just wondering, you know, you give us a list of what's been discussed and decided on in the gold meetings. Could we have that as councillors on a regular basis? Because looking at what you said, there's nothing confidential, I don't think. And I think we should know, rather than getting it in the Facebook or the Gazette, so we could tell our residents what's happening. At the moment, you know, you've just told us a number of things that's been discussed and decided in these gold meetings. I think all councillors would appreciate an update, you know, even if it's once a fortnight. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think there's any problem with that whatsoever. Gemma, who's in the meeting today, she kind of coordinates all of that. She produces a log immediately after every meeting, and I'm sure, you know, anything that's not confidential could be quite easily mopped up in an email to all councillors, you know, within 24 hours of the meeting taking place. Meeting takes place on a Thursday afternoon. There's no reason why by Friday we can't have a simple email with a summary of any decisions made at that meeting. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Bring Councillor Story in, and then I think we'll be moving on the agenda. So, Councillor Story.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd echo those thoughts. And one of the reasons I was asking the court's question is obviously I had no idea about that until I saw it in the press. And I think a lot of members on all sides of the chamber, different political parties have really similar concerns. And, you know, if we can get a digest from Gold Group, I think it would be very beneficial. It might have been better to have had it before now, but if we can get that for future, that would be great. Let's be absolutely clear about this. The government said they would provide everything that local councils needed. And I'd like to place it on record that we have an £8.2 million shortfall in what we expect to be the impact of COVID. So let's be clear that we have not received everything that we will need as a council from the government. But what I want to ask about is, firstly, the 2.3 million savings we potentially won't make due to COVID. How is that not? I mean, I presume that it's the government who've said this, but how is that not calculated as a direct impact of COVID? Bearing in mind, the only reason we can't make those savings or may not make those savings is because of COVID. And that seems to me to be the dictionary definition of a direct impact of COVID. And the second thing is, in light of the Neptune Centre and the decision being taken tomorrow, obviously that is a financial pressure that's come about due to COVID and is a decision that's being taken in year. And are we expecting any further in-year decisions in terms of budgeting, or do we expect that further recommendations of that scale may be needed in next year's budget process?
Thanks, Matt. You said quite a lot there. I'm not too sure I'll remember everything that you asked me. So in terms of the cost, I think the government's stance on this is that they are meeting all of the expenditure requirement and a fair proportion of the lost income. There are other financial impacts and also allowing us to smooth out the impact of council tax receipts reducing. In terms of savings, the discussions and not achieving savings, the kind of government stance on that appears to be that COVID is but one reason why you may not have delivered savings, and you should always be working on the basis that not all savings could be delivered, and that's why you have reserves. And it could equally be down to poor financial management within the authority. But if an authority finds itself in a position where it feels that it's on the verge of serving a 114 notice, i.e. saying it doesn't have enough money to run, then the government would have a discussion with that.
Tony, we're breaking up, Tony.
Sorry, I don't know why. So the government's position is basically savings is not just, the non-achievement of savings is not purely down to COVID. And if we get in a position where the non-achievement of savings is going to make us financially unsustainable, then and potentially issuing a Section 114 notice, then the government would have an individual discussion with each council individually. In terms of the Neptune Centre, it's not actually a cost to the council, because that is a cost that we're confident will be able to be met from the COVID grants that the government have provided of 10.7 million so far. So there's no direct cost to the council of whatever action is decided upon tomorrow at the meeting that's taking place. It's just what proportion of government grant that has been provided it's likely to take up, rather than a cost to the council. And sorry, I think you might have asked something else as well, Matt, that I've forgotten.
I was just saying that in terms of the scale of the decision we're talking about, you know, potentially leaving leisure centres stay closed for longer because we have those pressures. Are we looking in next year's budget at cuts of similar scale that we may have to consider in the options?
It's too early to say what scale the savings are likely to be. We absolutely will need a greater level of saving than we've currently got, than we previously budgeted for next year. We'll have a firm handle on that by September. I don't expect it will be 8 million. I expect it will be much lower than that. But there will be additional savings required next year. I'm certain of that.
Right. I'd like to thank Tony. I'd like to move on now to the rest of the agenda. But yeah, thank you, Tony. That was quite a comprehensive presentation, and a lot of questions were answered there. So thank you very much. Right, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 7, which is the budget and balance scorecards. I believe we've got Andrew Humble, who is Head of Financial Plan and Support, and Paul Stevens, who's Head of Strategy, Information and Governance. So I'd like to hand over to you two. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. This is Paul Stevens talking. I think Andrew's on the call.
Yeah,
Andrew?
I am.
Yeah. So I don't know how much time we've got, Chair, but just to briefly go through the report and then take any questions. As you said, this is the strategic plan update for the end of the last financial year, so to end of March. We reported this to Executive in July. Oh, no, in June, sorry. And now it's coming on to Scrutiny. A little bit later than we would otherwise expect, but obviously that's due to COVID, which you've just discussed. So it covers the first progress update we've got against the 2023 strategic plan that was approved by Council in March. The final revenue and capital budget outturns for last year, which I think will be of most interest. A position on borrowing and reserves, an update on strategic risks, and then some actions we're taking to address the issues raised in the report that are somewhat more significant than actions we would normally have to take during the end of year. So just to go through, I'm on paragraph 5 now, strategic plan, moving on from there. So as I alluded to, Council approved a new strategic plan on the 15th of January for 20 to 23. And then since that time, we've been working to develop a work programme, an underpinning work programme for the strategic plan. But as the report makes clear, that was obviously significantly disrupted by COVID-19 pandemic, which has had a significant impact, not only on our finances, but also on our strategic objectives. So as a result of that, we're planning to renew or review the strategic plan to come back to full council in November 2020 in draft terms. And that'll integrate findings and recommendations from recovery planning that's been presented to the board over recent months. From paragraph 9 onwards, we set out what we think are some of the key performance issues that arose during the last quarter. On paragraph 9, it sets out impact on community safety. So you can see there that we saw an overall reduction in crime and antisocial behaviour in the quarter. And that was a significant reduction in crime, in particular, due essentially to COVID-19, the lead up to national lockdown. We saw crime in ASB fall in 16 out of the 20 wards. There was the ASB increased significantly during the last month of the quarter, and thereafter actually, as a result of COVID-19 infractions, which have now tailed off a little bit, obviously, now lockdown's being eased. From paragraph 11, we talk about improvement to children's services following the Ofsted report. And I think the board might have, correct me if I'm wrong, been updated on progress outside of this report, but if not, we can go through it in a little bit more detail. As you know, a DfE commissioner was appointed to scrutinise the council's services following the negative Ofsted judgment. And they published their report on the 4th of June, and we've got a link there to the full report, but from paragraph 14, we summarise what was said, which is that the commissioner confirmed the council would retain control of the service for now. And then it outlines the challenge faced by the council and what it should do next. I think there's a full report coming to the committee. Carolina Scott can let me know on this. But we can take any questions on children's services at the end. From paragraph 26, we just highlight that children subject to statutory intervention from children's services continue to increase during the quarter, and that had an impact obviously on the revenue budget outturn. And then in paragraph 30 and 31, we talk about impacts on local life expectancy and economic activity. And I think it's already been well highlighted nationally that COVID will have a particular impact on health outcomes and economic outcomes for the foreseeable future. And then from paragraph 32, we talk a little bit about the investment prospectus and how we're still delivering on that during the COVID-19 pandemic. Although obviously there are implications that we need to take into account in revising the new strategic plan. So now we're down to paragraph 37, which is the revenue budget outturn. But if anyone has any questions on the strategic plan review and some of the issues highlighted there, we'll take any questions on that now, Chair, before moving on.
Have we got any questions? I can't see anyone, Scott, so you'll have to let me
Chair,
know
I have a question.
All right. Do you want to come in then, Councillor Pope?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know it has been mentioned before, but we've had in the past where children's services, there was a limited number of children cost the council in excess of 12 million. I just wonder how that, I know there are various programmes, I know they're going to continue, but I just wonder how that is being looked at to, these are in who needs very special care, etc. But I just wondered how that's been impacted at the moment and whether that's being improved, because obviously that's a considerable sum of money.
Yeah. Andrew, have you got any more detail on that?
There are panels going on to examine the, I think it's 72 now, children in residential, external residential placements. And those are being looked at. In particular, there's a cohort of about 15 that are being looked at the moment, 15 to 20 which are being looked at, who are high volume and trying to reduce that. So there's an exercise going on at this current time on that. And obviously results will feed back and hopefully that will produce improved financial results.
If this relates to, sorry.
Philip, got a question from Councillor Branson. Can I bring Councillor Branson in?
Yes, thank you. I'm quite concerned about how we're moving forward with regard to our assessment of the needs for investment following COVID. Two particular issues kind of come to line. There's plenty of evidence that suggests that we're not going to have the same amount of retail outlets in the town centre. So we may have to look at alternative use of buildings there, maybe use for housing. Also, I'm very concerned about the future of public transport, given the fact that a lot of bus companies are being effectively kept afloat by the government at the moment with large amounts of money. But once that money ends, do we have any idea, either at a local or as a Tees Valley basis, what we're going to do to make sure that those bus routes continue to run? Because I'm concerned that if we don't do anything, then the private companies will shut them down, or a lot of them down. Yep.
Do you want me to answer that one? Yeah, I think those are matters, I agree with what you've said. I think those are matters that are being picked up by the council's recovery subgroup, looking at the business economy and infrastructure. And if we could, I think we'd probably want to bring that back to the committee. But obviously it's something we're looking at through that group and in developing the council's new strategic plan, as I alluded to earlier. But I think we need to bring in the chair of that group to answer the question properly.
There's no more questions, so do you want to carry on, Paul?
No,
Yeah.
Can I, sorry, Chair.
Go on.
Sorry, can I just come in?
It's difficult because nobody's got the videos on, so I can't see anybody raising their hand. So,
I got mine on. So can I just speak about the children's services? You know, I'm very concerned about this. that we should be thinking about the children, and I know the costs have to be considered, but the children must always come first. And those children that need extra special looking after, then we have to pay for it. Okay? That's all I wanted to say. I don't want...
Is that a question? Have you got a question, Teresa Higgins? Is that a question?
Sorry, yes. So the question is that going to be the policy of the council that, and I hate saying it like this, are they going to consider money before they consider the child? I can't see that happening, but I have to ask.
I think that's certainly not the policy of the authority.
No.
I think what we're saying is it's not necessarily getting value for money from some of the placements, which is what they're looking at. But certainly not meeting the needs of the child's not being considered in any way.
No.
Thank you, and I knew that was going to be the answer, but I just had to ask the question.
Carry on, Paul. Thank you.
I think it's over to Andrew, Chair, to cover the revenue and capital part.
So I won't go through the whole detail of this, but from paragraphs 35 to paragraphs 81 gives the revenue outturn, and then from 82 to 98 you've got the capital outturn. So in paragraph 35, I think it is, on the council overspent its revenue budget by 6.6 million, which was a 5.9% over its budget. That was up by 884,000 from the Q3 projection, which was reported. And as you can see in paragraph 35, that shows the split by directorate. As you can see, obviously, as we've discussed just now, the main pressure of the overspend is within children's services, where we had in total a 7.2 million overspend against the budget. Paragraph 37 shows that we had some better projections or improved surpluses or underspends in other areas of the council. So that brought it down to the overall position of just nearly 6.6 million. Just to note, in paragraph 38, we also did have some COVID expenditure in March 2020, which we did included as part of those costs that you've seen earlier. So there was a small amount in March 2020 which was accounted for. Paragraph 39, whilst we're reporting the 6.6 million pressure, we did have 3.3 million in a demand risk reserve, which was kept aside as part of the budget, support with demand pressures in social care, mainly children's. So what we're asking is that needs to be used, obviously, to cover the 6.6 million overspend. Paragraph 40 to something like 73 just gives detail on the various areas. I don't intend to go through them in any great depth because they're all there and they're fairly detailed in the report. The report format changed a bit at Q4 because we decided that it was needed due to the financial situation to provide a lot more detail on that. So there is quite a lot of detail in there, and it's quite detailed. 74 to paragraph 74 to 81 state about the revenue budget spending controls. As we've said before, we have a vacancy control process in. We've got checks against expenditure over £5,000, and we've got strong controls over staff travel, stationery, and use of first-class post. We've also looking at agency staff. It's been difficult to implement that fully, but we are minimising it. We are trying to minimise them. The main areas of agency staff are within children's due to difficulties in recruiting staff. And so therefore that is something that's still continuing, but it's probably not been as successful in ceasing it as much as we had it for Q2, but we are minimising it. And there's also a number of other measures we're put in place in children's. In paragraph 78, There's a whole host of things there which show what children's are doing to try and mitigate the pressure ongoing from 2021. And obviously the effect of those will be reported in the quarterly reports for 2021. Some more detail as well on the next paragraphs about children's. And then on paragraph 82 onwards, we've got the capital budget. We actually underspent on our capital budget by about 5%, which equates to roughly 3.6 million. Now that was mainly due to COVID, the effect. Some of the schemes we had were due to finish at the end of March and didn't finish because of COVID. So that is purely schemes just being brought forward to the future years, but being carried forward to future years, 2021. There was some bringing forward of some schemes for the purchase of vehicles and essential property maintenance as well. So I won't go through that in great depth, but it's fully detailed there in the report. And any questions? And then paragraph 99 gives an effect of our borrowing and states in paragraph 100 why we had to increase the borrowing at year end. There was some capitalisation of finance leases, which was a technical issue of 20 million. We had some short-term borrowing to ensure we had enough liquidity for COVID. In the end, the government actually did give us the money a lot earlier than what we thought on that. And so that was only for a month at the time. So we didn't think we'd get it as quickly off the government that for the grants, but they did. And then we had some to support the investment strategy. Paragraph 103 shows the balance of reserves and provisions and shows how that 6.6 million in transfers to general fund column, it shows how that 6.6 million was funded. And in that earmarked reserves, there was 3.3 million, as I've explained before, on the social care demand. So really, and then paragraph 104 is quite important to note that whilst we covered it by the council's reserves, we are now at the general fund reserve is at the minimum level recommended by the current section 151 officer. And that is an important point because previously we've been asked, can't we just use reserves? We are now at the lowest level, the minimum level that's recommended. And we are probably on the lower side on a SIPFA, which is a professional accountancy body, risk and resilience index on that. So that's just a point to make. I think that's probably it, isn't it, Paul?
Can I just say Councillor Coop would like to come in and ask you a question? Councillor Coop?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just note in the report about foster homes, etc., and helping foster care. I presume this is advancing because I do want to make quite clear that I agree with Councillor Higgins that the looking after children is absolutely vital for it. It's not a money thing I was pointing out before, it's the fact that we can get better thing in-house. But one of them has been pointed out in the past is foster care. It's very expensive to put people in a children's home miles away. I know we want to bring them back in-house, saves money. That money can then be used for other children. So how are we doing with foster care?
Currently, I must admit, I don't know the full position of where we are, but it does take a period of time to get through the system, to get a child fostered and that. So it's not an instant process. So there is a scheme ongoing and that'll just filter through in the time. I'm not totally sure of the time period, but there's a time period of up to 18 months. So we should see that coming through, but it won't be a quick process. This is the point we've got to make. And that's both for looking after the children and hopefully we will get some financial savings out of that as well.
Thank you.
Is that a question?
So, Councillor Branson and then Councillor Walker wants to come in. So I'll take Councillor Branson.
I don't think I have another question, actually. I think I must have asked it earlier.
Right, I'll take Councillor Walker. Councillor Walker, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just one. I mean, on 55, you went through that at the speed of an express train, Andrew. So I'm trying to. I've got papers all over me, trying to keep up with you, but hey ho. I'm 55. I mean, that's an area people forget that when we changed leadership, the executive director of Children's Services budget overspent by quite a lot as well, didn't it? Because of the fact that we were changing leadership and jobs were going, people were going, coming back in. So obviously that's going to all cost money, which is unfortunate because obviously it's still part of the Children's Services budget. And I quite agree with other people regarding the safety of children. And I think some of the reasons why children are put away from Middlesbrough is because of their safety, and we must always remember that. There will always be children who cannot be kept in town because of those situations. But unfortunately, you know, it's an unfortunate cost. But I think we need to up our foster care levels, obviously. But that's another section for another service area. Not your problem, Andrew. So aren't you lucky on that?
That's fine. It becomes my problem on the finance, so that's fine.
But thank you. But yeah, I just wondered about the costs actually regarding the budget overspend on 55. I mean, does that include the new wages, the new wage levels, or what? You know, what does that include?
That will include agency costs of the agency director at the time. And it will include the full cost of the previous director as well. And those are all outlined in the statement of accounts. There's a note in the statement of accounts which has to outline that. Right. And so those become, and the draft statement of accounts is going to Corporate Affairs 30th of July.
Thank you very much.
Those are on the internet now. So
I think Councillor Halawi, did you want to come in, Councillor Halawi?
Yes, please. Andrew, it's a question about the fact that our reserves are now at the lowest level that we can have. I mean, that must be quite worrying in view of having any unforeseen circumstances. I mean, obviously, I imagine you've tried to prevent any unforeseen circumstances, but that is of great concern that our reserves are at that all-time low level now, the minimum?
It's at a minimum level. The minimum level is determined by a number of factors. And as good housekeeping, you should always keep something in reserve. And obviously the scenario has been COVID is one example of that and so the pressure you get is to use your reserves to balance the budget and not have a reserve. And this is one of the key points that we need to reserve. That 9.4, as you can see, if you looked at that overspend now, that would cover you for about 2 years of that sort of level. So that's why that's set at that. It's done by calculation. It's reviewed and will be reviewed shortly as part of the MTFP update. That will be reviewed, that level, and there may be a desire to up that level because of recent events have proved that we may need a great reserve. It's not saying there's no reserves. It's just saying it's the minimum recommended level.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Andrew.
Do you have any more questions for Andrew or Paul? No. Right, can I just thank you to Paul and Andrew for quite an in-depth report and answering our questions, and look forward to meeting you when you come back to OSB in the future. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Move on to the next agenda item. The agenda item is agenda item number 8, which is Scrutiny Chair's update. I am aware that unfortunately, because of technical issues and Councillor McTighe is not present, and she did have issues at the last meeting, but Councillor Branson, the Vice Chair, stepped in, and Councillor David Coop will update us on the Health Scrutiny Panel. When people come in, when I invite you to come in, can you say who you are and which scrutiny you chair? Thank you. So,
yeah. Do you want me to do it now? Chair, thank you. Councillor David, Vice Chair of Health Scrutiny Panel. We had a meeting on Tuesday this week, which was an interim meeting. It's our first proper meeting since lockdown, our first proper virtual meeting. We had Mark Adams, Director of Public Health, South Tees, and Craig Blair, Director of Commissioning, Strategic Delivery and Tees Valley Clinical Commissioning Group, CCG, who gave us an excellent report, which was very well received. The panel did ask quite a few questions regarding that. I'm sure that everybody there was very impressed with that. We've also set the work programme for the year. If you want to know the details, the ones that we've suggested to the panel, I can let you have those. It was actually the first 2 items, which I should have here in front of me. Yes, I do. We want to look at the health equality in England, the Marmot report. 10 years have highlighted worrying retrograde trend in life expectancy. That's sort of one area we want to look at. And then the first 1,001 days, which is basically from conception to the 2 years. We want to look at them, and also a one-off look at, which is a PFI scheme at James Cook Hospital. We're hoping to do that perhaps in September when we do the final opiate report. So that was that. It was a good meeting, and I also gave a report on the OSB. I would be happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions for Councillor Coop? Don't think so. Right. Thank you for that, Councillor Coop. I'll move on to Councillor Saunders. Councillor Saunders, would you like to give us your update? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As you say, Councillor Mick Saunders, Chair of the Economic Development and Environment Infrastructure Panel. The EDI Scrutiny Panel met on the 15th of July to agree topics for the future work plan for the year. Jeff Field also attended. He's the Director of the Environment and Community Service, and Richard Horniman, Director of Generation and Culture, provided an overview of their service areas to assist members with selecting issues to review. Members also discussed the revised plan of action for finalising their review on Teesside Crematorium at the next meeting. The panel agreed 1 main topic and 5 short reviews, which I'll mention now, Chair, if that's okay. The main topic is the town-wide regeneration post-COVID-19, not just concentrating on the town centre, but the town-wide. The short reviews will be good management of the trees policy, parking on grass verges, update on the review of the local plan, an update from the Borough Youth Climate Action Team, livable streets, broadband, and pest control. As I said, hopefully they will be sent to overview and scrutiny board for approval in September. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Saunders. Has anyone got any questions for Councillor Saunders? No. Right, we'll go on to Councillor Garvey.
Yes,
sorry,
please.
Sorry,
Yes.
Councillor Higgins. It's
Sorry.
really difficult when nobody's
I
video
know.
on. Councillor Higgins.
Councillor Saunders, thank you very much for putting on your list about the tree problem. It's right across the town, and I get more complaints about it than anything else, apart from dumping. But I mean, you know, we need to have a policy on the trees, because, you know, they're not going to stop growing, and it's getting dangerous in some areas now. So thank you for putting that on your list.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Tracy. Yep, great. Thank you.
Right, I bring in Councillor Garvey. Sorry, Councillor Coop wants to come in on that.
Yeah, can I agree with Councillor Higgins? I've had 3 or 4 complaints recently about trees getting to 40 and 50 feet tall. I'm getting residents tell me that it's breaking their foundations up. So I totally agree with that. I would echo what Councillor Higgins had just said. Thank you.
Can I answer that, Chair?
Yeah, quickly answer it, because then I've got Councillor Branson who wants to come in and ask you a question.
Yeah, David.
Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, David. Yeah, we chatted about, as you know, the policy of replanting, new planting these trees. You know, making sure that the right trees for the future, and that they're planted in the right places, not like they have been in the past. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Branson, did you want to ask Councillor Saunders a question?
Yes, just simply to kind of support what Teresa and David Coop have said. trees are a big problem for us in Colburn, and I think we have to have a look at the tree policy because it's becoming a major issue with me now. I think there is a real danger of people taking the law into their own hands if we don't do something about it in the near future. So I think it's very important. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Cheers, Chair.
Right, thank you. We'll move on now to Councillor Garvey. Councillor Garvey.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Councillor Garvey, Berwick Hills Pallister. I'm also the chair of the Children and Young People's Social Care and Scrutiny panel. We met on Monday the 20th, Monday just gone. Sue Butcher, Director of Children's Services, and Rob Brown joined us. Rob's the Director of Education and Partnerships. The panel, Sue and Rob went over the structure of children's services and the details the services provide by the department, which we found very interesting, because obviously there's a lot of changes being made at the moment. So it's a good idea to keep up to date on positions and titles, that sort of thing. The panel discussed setting its work programme for the year for the next cycle. And the details of this will be formally submitted at the next overview and scrutiny board for approval. It was agreed that the panel needed to focus on progress against Children's Services Improvement Plan, and that any topic it wanted to look at in more detail should align with the improvement plan. The panel decided it will initially examine the No Wrong Door project and the link with sufficiency and permanency planning, and to also take into account the perception of children in care, which was brought up by Councillor Wright, which was brilliant. We brought up a report from 2009, which we've also sent out to all the members of the panel to have a look at, which was brilliant. We also looked at the panel also wants to focus on youth services and the paced bed provision, which was another thing that Councillor Wright brought up, which is another good shout. And the panel has agreed future meeting dates for the remainder of the year. I'd also like to say that at the beginning of the meeting, I announced as chair that the panel would be taking a slightly different role in this cycle, with all the changes that have been made and the continuous changes, that we needed to be sort of a more of an overview and looking over the changes that have been made, rather than looking at bodies of work that had been finished. We thought that was a better idea. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Garvey. Has anyone got any questions for Councillor Garvey? No? Right, thank you for that. I am aware that the other three scrutiny panels haven't formally met, but I will bring you in to see if you want to comment or say anything. So I'll bring Councillor Platt in. Councillor Platt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm Chairman of the Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny Panel and Chairman of the Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel. As you've rightly said, I have nothing to report because we haven't had a meeting since our last OSB, but we have a meeting of the Children and Young People's Learning on the 27th of July, which is Monday, and we're going to talk about the plan of action for next year. And again, on the 29th, we have on the Wednesday, we have a meeting of the Adult Social Care. Again, we will talk about the plan of action for next year.
Thank you for that, Councillor Platt. And I look forward to hearing your work programme at the September meeting.
Okay.
Can I bring in Councillor McIntyre now? Councillor McIntyre, do you want to say anything?
Chair, Councillor Chris McIntyre, can you hear me?
I can do, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Councillor Chris McIntyre, Chair of Culture and Communities. It's only a very brief update, Chair. We've completed a scrutiny on food banks, and I presented our recommendations to our executive recently. Our next meeting will be Tuesday the 28th, and we're going to discuss new work areas and topics to look at. That's about it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Because only 3 scrutinies have met and the other 3 haven't, I'd like to defer to agree their work programme till September. Is everybody in agreement with that? I'm sure
Agree,
that was
Chair.
a yes.
Yeah, I agree, Chair.
Thank you for that. Right, I'd like to thank everyone for their, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. And agenda item number 9 is any other urgent items, which in the opinion of myself to be considered. I have no urgent items to be considered. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank once again our speakers, thank our support workers from Democratic Services. Thank you so much. Thank you all for attending and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.